that will want to hear this presentation afterward is we're really excited to have this presentation today. So, and this should be a very informative workshop. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to introduce our speakers today. For those of you who don't know, I'm Todd Ogden. I'm the president of Downtown Lincoln Association. And we are starting these series of workshops in lieu of our typical annual meeting, and we want to keep doing these through January. So this is actually our second of the series. We did a panhandling and homeless awareness workshop last week that was very informative, and this one should be very interesting as well. So first of all, I wanted to introduce Jemalyn Griffin. She's here, and she's an integrated marketing communications industry expert and an ad PR professor of practice at the College of Journalism at UNL. So appreciate you coming on board here today, Jemalyn. And also with us is Tyler Thomas. He's an award-winning digital strategist who builds brand engagement for the Big Red brand at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Most importantly, Tyler and his family live in downtown Lincoln. So he also brings a wonderful downtown Lincoln perspective with the family. Actually, that's kind of the white whale. We don't have a ton of full families in downtown Lincoln. So we love having that. And Tyler is used to be a wonderful colleague of mine with the American Marketing Association. So he used to make my life miserable on that board. He knew more than everybody else there, so it was hard trying to one-up him there. So I really appreciate having him here today. And with that said, I'll kick it off to you, Jemalyn and Tyler. Thanks again for doing this.
Good morning, all, and thank you for having us. Like Todd said, we are excited to be here to share what we have with you. We know it's not been easy for anybody over the last 7 months, personally or professionally. Both Jemalyn and I work professionally in the area of social media and digital communications and marketing. Jemalyn's expertise is also in public relations. So we're here and excited to present, kind of our 5 ideas to kind of keep things really simple and tight, but also leave plenty of time to answer specific questions that you may have or areas that you want us to follow up with. Like Todd said, we want this to be a workshop, less of us talking at you, lecture, more of an interactive experience, but also be able to leave you with some key takeaways so that this next hour isn't something that's just kind of thrown away for the rest of your week. As Todd mentioned, I am a proud resident of downtown Lincoln, live, shop, work. All of my time right now, because I have nowhere else to go either, is in downtown. So definitely understand what all of you are dealing with when it comes to with the pandemic and those types of things. So Jemalyn and I are going to walk through our presentation, kind of present that to you at the beginning, and then plenty of time for questions. If there is a question that you don't want to forget, please drop it in the chat and we'll try to address it. If there's a technical difficulty, I think you can also message Katie or Todd and we'll make sure that works. We all know that the Zoom world is not perfect, but we will do our best as we walk through the next hour with you. So let me share my screen and we'll jump in. Alrighty. So this Social Media 101 Pandemic Edition is something that we put together, really, like I mentioned, to help you think through the strategy of your social media program and really help you kind of go back to the basics of this. I know there is so much going on and you have a lot of competing priorities and a lot of competing nerves and anxieties. So we want to always bring it back to the most simple and easy part of any kind of a digital communication program, and specifically social media, that is really focused on thinking about very simple strategy that you can then implement and really prioritize your time. So this next step was kind of the interactive one, but instead of everybody having to unmic and that kind of thing, if you just kind of jot down on your own pieces of paper or, brainstorm yourself, but what comes to mind when you hear social media, answers we usually get, in live presentations and conversations with our students, different platform names, advertising versus posting, boosting, lots of different phrases and terminology that kind of gets thrown at people, especially when it comes to social media, because most people are not doing this work 100% or full time. It is usually a tacked on responsibility, which is understandable, but also disappointing in some areas because it is a discipline, it is a career path. And to do it well, you really have to create focus on it, just like you have, you know, a chef in a kitchen and in front of the house manager. You wouldn't have them try to do all of those roles. Maybe things are changing a little bit in the pandemic, but ideally social media does have some kind of priority or dedication within your business. And our hope is these next kind of 5 steps help you think about that strategy, or at least reflect on where you are and where you want to go. So we try to start with 5 things. I find it easy when it comes to marketing, communications, just general trying to remember things. If it's more than 5 things, it gets a little bit cloudy, and then you need giant screenshots and notes of paper and lots of definitions and resources, and it just gets too messy, and then it's not memorable. So our first one is the who. So as you're thinking about your social media program or who you're trying to connect with through your social media channels, it's really important to take the world and bring it in into who are you really trying to connect with? Who are you trying to market to? Who are you trying to build community with? Who are you trying to sell to? Who is your perfect consumer, depending on your goals of your program. But if we don't really bring it in to who do we want to reach, and who our best customers are, or are they new customers or returning? So are we recruiting or retaining? It's very difficult to focus because you're trying to be everything to everyone. If you have a menu of 300 items, or you say, nope, we do this really well, and these are the types of people that we want within our organization or that we want to connect with online, it does help everybody be more focused. It also helps you measure success and really keep pointed on this.
Yeah, and I was gonna just add to that, you know, many times when I've worked with clients, either through Yacht agency or when I'm working within an organization, many times there's a larger discussion around the who, because the audience can be very expansive, because you might have an audience where you're trying to impact their perception, or you might have an audience where they've never heard of you. And so it's really important to segment your audiences based off of what you want them to do. And we'll be going more into that, but a simple way where you can start is, if you already have social media platforms, I'd recommend just doing an audit of who's actually following you. There was a time where I was consulting a client and they wanted to expand their customer base, but in reality, when we looked at their Twitter account and their Facebook account, the people who were following them were actually current employees. And so the message, right, needs to then change depending on who you're talking to.
And the audit is a good point, and don't hear the word audit and then get scared. It's not like it is an accounting term, but it doesn't have to have with the accounting fear. It's really just taking a look at, like Jemalyn said, who already are you interacting with? Who's already part of your community, and who are they, and are they the right people? Are you trying to attract new people, or are you trying to retain those people you have? And how do you align your goal and your mission or your message with that audience? The next piece is just, ABC, kind of focusing on the basics. So not only are we only going to teach you 5 things, we're also going to go back to the basics of the alphabet. And Jemalyn's going to talk a little bit about these areas of what you want them to do in regard to awareness, behavior, or change in perception.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. So essentially, ABC is a framework that really helps us understand categories in terms of what you want people to do. Sometimes I think whenever you're working on social media, you can have 50 different goals that you want to achieve, but ultimately all of your campaigns should really feed into one of these categories. And so ABC is a great framework for you to remember that. So whether or not you have a paid campaign on social media, whether you're trying to grow organically, or whether you're trying to start a new social media presence. I saw a few questions on the spreadsheet that talked about, well, how do you even start an e-commerce presence on social media? So you really want to take a step back and understand, out of these 3 objectives, what is your goal? So that can really encompass increasing awareness about your brand or about a new product that you're launching, or about a new location you're opening up, or a special that you are making available to your consumers. Behavior, right? That is where you want them to do something. And it doesn't necessarily have to equate to sales, although that's certainly an option, especially for small businesses. But I would say behavior can encompass everything from wearing a seatbelt to stop smoking, right? There's other campaigns out there that can be behavior based that aren't necessarily tied to the bottom line. And then lastly, there's change in perception. And I always tell clients that perception is really the hardest thing to change, because if your consumers already have a perception of you, for example, and it's not positive, or maybe they don't know about you, you really have to work hard to change that perception, because, as we say in public relations, perception is reality. And so however your consumers feel about you currently is really going to impact their overall behavior towards your brand. So it's really important, if you're trying to change perception, that you do some, and when I say research, it's not meant to scare you. This isn't academia. It's really asking questions, right? And having conversations with the people who you want to be following you, and ask them, hey, what do you currently think of our brand? What do you think we could be doing better? And it's amazing, even though they could be your friends or people who are regular consumers or customers, they'll really be honest with you and show you why, why or why not they think your social media platforms are effective. So again, which products are most interesting to your audience? That's really where you want to understand, based off of your audience, what products will actually resonate with them, and then translate that to your content.
And I think a huge point to really focus in on what Jemalyn just said is, are we asking people? We often get very forward focused and keeping things moving, but we forget that we have relationships with people that follow us on social media. We have relationships with people who walk in the door of our store or our business, asking for feedback. Sometimes it'll be feedback you don't want to hear, but that's probably the best feedback to get, because it allows you to focus, and especially on which products are the most interesting to your audience. The key word there is audience, not which products do you want to sell the most of, or the areas in which you want to grow the most. Those are still important, but if the audience is not interested in them and or isn't aware of them or needs to change their behavior, it's difficult to approach that in a social space without knowing that. And so we often, it could be as simple as a Twitter poll or an Instagram story poll, ask some questions, this or that. You can do a lot of very low risk, low hanging fruit type research. I have my students in my class go to, we'll talk more about this in the e-commerce one in a few weeks, but they go to different businesses' websites and try to complete a goal that I give them. And, they interview 5 students for 5 minutes and just see if the task is possible. And the insights on that are huge, because we often build things, share things, create things, but never get any feedback. Our only feedback is it selling? Is it, is the conversion happening? And when those things aren't happening, we also change things without really having it informed to understand, why do we need to change it? Well, how should it be changed? Is it as simple as, talking more about X and less about Y? Or is it going to actually focus in on the goal that we're trying to accomplish? The where. So number 3 is where. Which platforms best align with your audience and your goals? So as Jemalyn mentioned within the ABCs, and we talked about with the who, it's really difficult to pick your lane in the social space. It can be overwhelming. It could also be just really draining if you're putting all of your energy on your Twitter account and all the people following you there are your employees. Not a bad problem, but if you're trying to increase sales or foot traffic and on a platform and they're all internal people, it's not going to accomplish that goal really well. So you might want to put your energy somewhere else. And then where do you spend your time and your resources? I think this is a constant decision that all businesses are having to make, is how do we prioritize our time, our people's time, the resources that we have within budgets, just in general in the business. So if you don't know who your audience is or what you want them to accomplish, it is really difficult to prioritize the where, but the need for prioritization is more important than ever, because there are just too many different channels. There are too many different things that you could be doing, but do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the resources? Are you doing them well? So some tips on this or ways to think through this is keep it really simple. If you do that basic audit and find that your Facebook audience is probably your best audience, do you really need to focus on lots of organic content that does take time? Or is there a small budget where you could have a very specific message and then target that? Facebook, in my opinion, is one of the better tools for targeting a message and really connecting with an audience and having a good return on the dollar investment. Other platforms also have that, but Facebook is probably just the widest with the largest number of people. But you can do advertising for pretty low budgets on Instagram and Twitter. And probably LinkedIn does it too, but I wouldn't spend money there right now. Just it's a little bit more expensive. But being able to prioritize, where do you want to create natural content and organic content? Where would there be some budget for paid? And can you keep it really simple? But the two lanes to get there, are the two things you got to check off first are really, who are you trying to speak to and what do you want them to accomplish so that you can have a goal with the content that you're creating?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think Tyler brought up a really, really good points around how you can start small on the paid side of things if you're trying to target consumers, because Facebook, to Tyler's point, is probably the most sophisticated in terms of being able to target audiences based off of zip code and a lot of those various demographics that we're trying to hit. On the organic side, though, if you're just getting started, I would just recommend things like tagging, right? Like what location, making sure that every post that you create includes your location. And because, when people click on that location, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, they should be able to ideally know where you're located. And then the other thing is doing just a quick Twitter hashtag search on what is the hashtag of your state or your local city or your community, right? Whenever I'm trying to get attention of UNL students, I'll hashtag UNL, or if I'm trying to do something Lincoln related, hashtag LNK. So really being able to understand hashtags is a really great impact. And when I was talking to a YouTube influencer, they were talking about how hashtags really, there's a strategy behind that, where you want to have 3 types of hashtags. The first type is really the larger hashtag, where it's all encompassing of the audience that you're trying to captivate. So maybe you work in health and wellness and you want to hashtag fit life or something like that. And then a second hashtag is a medium-sized hashtag, where you're trying to target a medium audience. So maybe it's hashtag Nebraska or hashtag Husker football. And then you want a micro hashtag, which is your third one. And that's really targeting specifically who you're trying to talk to. Whether that's, hashtag PRSSA, which is an organization that I lead, or even this association, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can think about it, but the rule of 3 hashtags really helps keep things simple.
Yeah, it also allows you to, in the regard to the research and the where, it helps you find people. I think what Jemalyn is with what she's saying with hashtags too is it's not only what you can include, but it's also where you might be able to find an audience or a community that you maybe weren't aware of, and be able to tap into that and build future relationships or create more content that helps extend the circle of your organization or your business. So the create side, so we know who we want to speak to, what we want them to do, and where we want to do them. But this is where we often kind of fall down or don't have as many resources. The first 3 things are some brainstorming and some optimization, but this is where the rubber meets the road. But what content do you have, and do you have time to create to reach your audience? This is also a decision, is this content that you're going to create and share every single day of the week? Is it content that is, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly? Are there actually better resources to just do paid, where it can, be a message out there that's going to hit more people, but you don't have to really create new content every single day? And what will resonate with your audience based on your goals? So Instagram is a great visual platform. So if you have a business type where you have lots of photos, videos, content that's really engaging, but your goal is to get them to, lead generation or get them to fill out a form, it's not the best tool organically to do that, because Instagram doesn't like you to link places. It's just not an easy avenue to do that. So while you can, build awareness, show off your latest and greatest things that are going on, and really build that, awareness piece, the actual consideration or lead generation is really difficult on that platform unless you're doing paid. So it's aligning what your strategy is or your goals with the platform, but then also what resources do you have? If you're a restaurant, can you take photos every morning? What kind of content really do people interact with? The other piece we have is social is time-based and algorithm-based. So it is difficult to put out content that is very specific, like do this by this time, because an audience member might get to it too late. It doesn't discourage you from doing things like that, but it's just being aware that things on like your Instagram grid, the content that's there all the time, if you're running a special there, it might be expired by the time the user finds it, but running things in Instagram stories might be more appropriate because it's more time-based, people see it more frequently, or at least have a call to action like, here's today's specials, but tomorrow we're gonna have more, so swing by or check this out, or you're really trying to extend the message beyond just a very specific time frame. The clients I work with, some of them are like, push this out right now. We need more people to show up in the next 2 hours. You can try it, you can do it. It's a difficult piece to actually guarantee that anybody will see that content in that time frame in which you've set, based just on algorithms that are outside of your control. And when you are in the creation phase and focusing on your goals and your audience, it's how often and how consistent can you be? How can you make sure that it's a priority? If you have a special of the day because you own a restaurant, you know you have to have a special every day. It's the same thing with social content. What's your content of the day or every other day? It shouldn't get the backseat to time, even though sometimes it is hard to prioritize. But if you are trying to lead more people to your organization or build awareness or make sales, you have to prioritize and create that consistent content that is going to connect with the audience.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I find that out of all the different categories that Tyler and I are talking about, people struggle the most with create, right? Because it's the most time consuming, and it can really be daunting for someone who's managing social media, in addition to running a business, and in addition to managing employees. And so don't let this creation or creating content be a barrier. I would say that learning how to create content that's evergreen and relevant over a long period of time, and also doing a quick search, all these analytics on the back end of these platforms are pretty user friendly now and free and accessible to those who own a business page on Facebook. And so take a look at what posts are performing the best, and don't be afraid to refresh that content in a new way. There's so many opportunities to leverage an article. If you own a coffee shop and you do a quick how-to article of how to, make your own cold brew in the morning or something like that. Added value content is something that consumers are looking for. I really do think that the future of advertising is actually content marketing, because what we're finding is audiences don't affiliate with brands that are just selling them something. They want to affiliate with brands that are adding value to their life. And so even if you think it's contradictory to your coffee shop, why should you tell people how to make their own, right? Then they start understanding and building relationships with you that's organic, and based off of a relationship as opposed to a selling point, right? Nobody wants to be bombarded with ads on Facebook. We work in advertising, and I try to skip as many ads as possible, but what I will click on is content that resonates with me. And so don't be afraid to create content that adds value to your consumers. It's a widely known fact that 85% of consumers trust their peers, right? Other peers, and not so much to the actual organization. And so it's really important, right, to leverage those people. So influencers are a huge thing right now, and everyone's talking about it, but it doesn't need to be Kim Kardashian. It can be a simple consumer that maybe you have a top customer that's really loyal, or maybe you're noticing the same person keeps liking all of your posts. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to those influencers and ask them to create content on your behalf. And what I find is that gives you a more authentic voice while giving you an opportunity to leverage other types of content that isn't owned by you. So those are just a few tips as you consider creating content.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one thing, just to continue on that association, like teaching somebody how to cold brew, you still have to buy coffee grounds, or you still have to buy coffee in some capacity. So if you are an organization that sells coffee and you can teach people how to use coffee at home, you've now extended that product that you might be able to sell. You've also, like Jemalyn said, you've made it relevant to the consumer around maybe something you're interested in versus just buying coffee grounds for cold brew. Like, you're teaching me something. You've added that value. And I think as we're probably seeing with our own consumer behavior, and as we do research in this area, consumers are too savvy right now just to be sold to. And those who are clicking on ads, it's likely they have a relationship with that business before. So you'll see retargeting ads. So you've been to a website or an app, and then you start seeing ads for that. They're basing that on some kind of a relationship that you have versus just seeing brands that you've never heard of. Those still happen, but those brands are having to spend a lot more energy and money to connect with a new message versus being able to just be in your feed based on the relationship that you might have with them because of a previous interaction. And to build on the other piece with influencers, user-generated content. So if you're an organization that has a physical brick and mortar or location, and people are your employees or consumers or others are tagging information, that's really helpful content to know, what are people taking photos of? What are people talking about? How can we do more of that? Or if they're complaining as a customer service piece, how can you maybe solve that problem? Based on the platform, we're seeing that people will share things they love, and they also will happily share things they do not like. And those are both opportunities for your business, because you can create more that they love, and you can try to fix the problems that maybe they're upset with, or if those are possible. But again, continuing to add value within the create piece, and trying not to let it be a piece that disables you or stops you from being able to be successful in this space. The last piece is really just the kind of, as a manager, as a person who is responsible for this work, having a plan for who's going to manage it. Do they have capacity within their workday? Do they have expectations that are set up upon them? Are they part of the conversation? What can they be doing to help you accomplish your goals and connect with your audience, build community, nurture the community? This does not have to be the responsibility of one person. When I consult with different groups, we have people who have dedicated roles. We have people who have each take a part in the greater strategy. If you think about, in a kitchen, you have the line cooks, you have the prep cooks, you have the chef, you have the people that clean the dishes, you have people that clean the kitchen. Like, all of those people are part of the kitchen crew, and they all have their own assigned role to accomplish the bigger goal of making sure the kitchen runs. I would say that's a great analogy for social media as well. You have to have somebody, you have to have that executive chef, but there are plenty of other people that can support and do different parts of it. I would say though, and students are great, and I will recommend them every day, but most students are not ready to be your executive chef. That's not their role yet. They need all that training from dishwasher up. So they are smart, they are skilled, they have knife skills, they've been training, they've grown up with a device in their hand. Their birth was probably live streamed, but be thinking about, are they ready to run your restaurant, or are they, a really good supporting role? And how best can you use their talents to help with the management of this? Because this is also, like Jemalyn said, the create is tough, but the management is even tougher, because you now have to actually put the work together and make sure you have the resources, which we are very much understanding of the lack of resources and time right now, especially with finding talent, and also just trying to keep everything else moving forward as business owners. So as you're thinking about this or need strategies, please ask us questions about this or let us know. We've developed a few models, and we've seen a lot of models in how this can be functional and work really well.
Yeah, and I would, to echo that, right? Managing a team, or whether you're solo, I try to put management into a category of its own in terms of managing up, managing across, and managing down. So when you think of managing up, right, whether you're the manager of social media, or maybe you're an employee, and you're trying to manage up to whoever that is, the owner or your CEO or your executive director, it's really important to advocate on why social media is important, right? And you do that through data, because, with social media, it's something where everyone's trying to be part of the conversation. Everyone's trying to be on everything, but don't try to overwhelm yourself. It's okay to focus on one platform. It's okay to have one campaign that posts once a week. You really don't. I always tell clients that you should like overperform your expectations, but not underperform, right? So don't set expectations so high that you're like, I'm going to post 3 times a day, and then you just burn yourself out. So don't be afraid to manage up and let your supervisor or your boss or your owner know, hey, this is what is manageable right now, and this is what we're going to focus on. And then managing across, right? How can you leverage your peers and your colleagues to actually create content for you? Or how can you divide the work? Maybe you do have a young worker who's in college who loves Instagram. Maybe you leverage them for Instagram and you leverage someone else for Twitter. It doesn't have to be the same person, but you do have to make sure there's some consistency in your voice and your tone, because you don't want to, one person to be very casual and then another person to be ultra formal. So that's really important when you're managing across. And then managing down, and when I say down, it's not like people who report to you necessarily, but it could be people who are buying your consumers, right? Who are buying your products and are loyal advocates. And how can you manage them in a way that will benefit your organization? And so don't be afraid to reach out to individuals who you think can contribute to your overall brand and tone of your organization, and leverage the content that they're already using. So that's just one way to look at managing your social platforms.
So kind of round us out. Here's the 5 things. If you're on a computer, take a screenshot. We'll also send this out, but these are the 5 things to remember. The who, the ABC, where, create, and manage. But like Jemalyn just mentioned, don't burn yourself out. Don't feel anxious after this meeting or this conversation. I always recommend to focus on 3 after any presentation or conversation with a consultant or conversation with a colleague, or after you get inundated with all this new information. Focus on 3 things you can do differently today. So really focus on what, within all your notes, what can I change, or what do I need to reflect on today? What could affect me, next week, and then maybe in a month. And you can change that frequency or those parameters based on what you're comfortable with. But I always find that people leave workshops or presentations with lots of great new information, but they don't know how to process it and activate it. And I found from feedback is focusing on those 3 things. So if you can take away what you've learned in the first 5 and then process them in 3, I find that will be helpful for you to actually be able to activate any of these recommendations, and hopefully influence the conversation that we're going to have in just a minute. So we'll leave our names up there. If you are on Twitter and you want to tweet at us, direct message us, or email us, also in this conversation now, because I believe, Todd, we still have some time this morning to ask questions. We thank you for your time, and we know you're busy, and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Jemalyn. Thanks, Tyler. Wonderful presentation. I know we probably have a couple questions. I saw at least one in the chat. I have some of my own, but I'll let the audience kind of open it up and ask some questions first.
I think Maggie might have had a question in the chat. It says, if I am a retailer, what can help me determine when or if I am posting too much? And I can take a stab at that, and Tyler, please chime in. of time. Don't try to, change up your social media presence every month because you're noticing it's dipping every Tuesday, right? Like, you can pay attention to different times that people are engaging the most, but don't feel like you always have to be optimizing your strategy. A trend can take up to a year in order for you to understand when are you performing the most optimally. But in terms of posting too much, what I would say is you don't want to bombard your audience either, right? Like, when you think of cadence and when you think of social media platforms, it's not a megaphone. It's not meant for you to yell at your customers. It's really meant as a two-way symmetrical communication tool, right? And when I say symmetrical, that means you should be engaging your consumer as much as your consumer is wanting to engage with you. So I would say if you're posting, 10 times a day, or if you notice that no one's liking your content after you posted 3 times that day, that's probably sending you a message that people are either just like scrolling past your content or they don't want to engage with your content. So I would say just pay attention to how people are engaging with your content over a long period of time.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is a little bit what we talked about earlier, is making sure that it's added value. So it's not just buy this thing or download this. It's look how this coat keeps you warm because the winter's coming, and everybody's transitioning to the weather. That's great. So like making sure that your messages is that communication back and forth with the community, and not just buy now, download now, because we want to build that relationship. We want to be able to have a sustainable relationship, and it's not a one-time purchase. Because even high price products, so even like a car, eventually you'll need a new car, or you're going to have a friend who needs a car, or a friend's kid who needs a car. So a lot of that is based on recommendation as well. So being able to have relevant content. I don't believe there is a magic number of time, how often you post in a day, week, month, whatever frequency. But I do believe in listening to your audience. And if, like Jemalyn said, people aren't interacting with it, it might be a sign of not necessarily too much, but maybe it's the wrong message, or not enough content, or it's just not resonating. So I think it's similar to when you think about products inside your organization, your business, what's moving and what's not. What are people going to in the store physically and buying, and what are they avoiding? And think about that as your approach to content as well. I think Anna just had a comment. So Anna's comment, I work at an architecture firm. We are wanting to promote our services, but also and retain current clients. Do you have tips, any tips for promoting our services that work to a narrow audience? Anna, great question. And I think, one strategy that comes top of mind is you're able to show your service to their clients. So often using the work that's completed as almost mini case studies, or having your clients be your advocates. To me, a successful client or a happy client is your best foot forward when it comes to marketing, because you might be crafting a message with it, but you're using their success, their brand, their name, their relevance to connect with more consumers. It is a very narrow group, but I think that would help connect with people who know you. And if you highlight a project you've done, and then that company shares it or talks about it, it's those relationships. So now you kind of have that ripple. The other piece too is if you're trying to attract other clients, depending on what type of architecture you do, if it's residential versus commercial, like Jemalyn mentioned earlier, Facebook has some very, very detailed targeting, where we pretty much give Facebook all of our information as humans, and they know it. And there is some targeting you could be doing with specific paid ads, to where you could take that narrow audience, but really connect that message with them. But in my opinion, if you have happy customers, those are the best people. Those are the reviews. Those are the people that you want to exploit. Exploit sounds terrible, but you really want to continue that relationship with them. And I can't imagine a customer who has a successful build or project with you being not wanting to talk about it and how great it is. And reciprocal to that, you're able to talk about what you did with them, and therefore use it again for recruiting other people who want it. I think about like interior design a lot. You go into somebody's house who looks nice, who did it? And it's all about word of mouth and referrals. And my assumption is in architecture, it's probably similar. And I would leverage that and see how you can use that as a way to continue to connect.
And just to add to that, I would just say 2 words: personas and partnerships. I would say when you have a really narrow audience, it actually works to your benefit because you know who you're actually targeting. That's probably the most work we do at Yacht Agency, is building personas for our clients, because so many times we don't take a step back and really build out a story based off of who we're trying to target. So if you know you have a very lean or targeted audience or niche audience, it's really beneficial to develop a persona persona. And it doesn't have to be anything super sophisticated. It can really just be, who is your ideal consumer? What are they doing? What are their motivations? Where are they hanging out? Who do they know? What is their household income? Things that will help influence the type of content you'll share. So that's one, that's personas. And then partnerships is really an opportunity for you to leverage people within the community that have a larger base. So for example, I don't know what kind of architecture firm you all target, but let's say you have a client that's working in healthcare and maybe you're building a new hospital or something. It could be beneficial to then establish a partnership with a healthcare company, and then you're reaching an entirely new audience that would otherwise not be accessible without that partnership.
I've had a couple questions from a couple businesses in the past, and we do this as well at Downtown Lincoln. When we have something tangible to give away, like for retailers, if they want to do a giveaway for a gift card or an item, or we do a downtown gift card promotion. I know the official rules are ever changing on Facebook, for example, and unofficial rules of what works and doesn't. Do you have good examples of the best way to engage in a promotion to use and gain extra traction and interactions in your social media platforms, and which platforms are the best to do that?
So the rules keep changing. At one point, you weren't allowed to kind of encourage interactions to actually give away the prize, but then everybody did it anyway. So I think Facebook realized, like, you really can't have rules we can't enforce, which that's a whole nother conversation about Facebook. But I would look at it of where's your, what are you giving away, and who is most excited about that? So as an example, if you're giving away something to a women's store, focusing it really on that audience, or communicating the message to a man who could provide it to a woman, or a woman who wants to win it. It's framing that in the place that you think people will want it. At the university, we did a giveaway last Friday on Instagram, partnering with a few businesses that are related to Husker football. Just a prize bag, bunch of little things throw in there. We asked them to tag a friend and to give, tagging a friend increased the engagement. Very easy task. And that allowed us to then pick a winner. So from a technical perspective, very easy within the guidelines of the platform. But really we focused it on students because that was our audience. That's where our most of our students at the university are following the Instagram account, or that's where we would like to see them at and be able to communicate to them. So 2 goals. One, can we get higher engagement on this so they'll see the other more strategic content versus just the fun confetti content, and be in a place. So we used other platforms, Twitter and Facebook, to push them all to Instagram to say, here's where the contest is. So we didn't run 3 different contests. We ran one on Instagram and then tied everything to it. Because it was really focused on all fans, but strategically it was focused on students. That's who we wanted to be able to engage with, because that's the message of watching the Huskers safely is the one we're trying to get to resonate, so that it is an action they complete. So I would say targeting your goal or whatever you have as a giveaway to the right platform, asking them, but also not asking them to do too much. So we contemplated, like, do they have to follow us, do X, Y, and Z? Well, as soon as you add on requirements, it starts to lose people because they want to go fast. So we still had to, tag a friend so that we would get more people and be able to engage, but we kept it really tight and limited versus trying to make it too expansive, even with really great prizes, because it does get a little bit nuts. However, though, on the same thing with like kind of getting leads, people will fill out a basic name and email if you need them to, and then you can use that information to market to them, later. So social can, give away a cool prize, but then you can still collect some information and then be able to market to them, or follow up with them. Like, we saw you entered, you didn't win, but here's a consolation prize or some other cool things that you can do. So just thinking through that, who do you really want to win? Who really wants that prize? And then placing it in a place that they're spending time.
That's great. I had one other question. Instagram and Facebook stories, how important are they? And when when are they appropriate? Is it worth their time? You know, we have a lot of businesses wondering, is it worth the time? It takes a little more time to do that. And you can get more interaction out of it. And yeah, curious on your guys' thoughts about that.
In my opinion, I look at those as within platforms, but also separate strategies. So like Instagram has the grid, Facebook has their wall, and then stories. Instagram stories, we find, especially with very time specific topical, the algorithm is prioritizing it. It's at the top of the app. Things are popping in. So it's also probably it's still strategic, but you don't have to think about it as often. Like you can make it kind of fun and quick. I think the grid has a lot more planning and thinking, because that content's going to be there for a while. That's really like, what are people going to perceive about us today, tomorrow, and in the weeks coming? Stories is kind of what's happening right now. So it's kind of your flash sales. It's your things in the moment. And then the grid, we look at, if you know, more longevity of brand awareness, messaging, because people can go back and look at those posts. The stories, unless you highlight them, they disappear within those 24 hours. So the 24 hours sucks, but it also is a benefit. So if you have something that you want to just create, you know, you only have that product that day, or things are coming up, or it's little moments, it will be created there. If you have enough followers, that is probably the only other place where you can swipe up and actually link people to a website without a paid piece. So we use that a lot as the institution, because we have enough followers. That's not the case for everybody, but that's how I prioritize it. Facebook stories, in my opinion, I don't have enough research or knowledge in that area of really investing specific time to stories on Facebook or LinkedIn, because those are rolling out now as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think anytime we're talking about stories versus posts, it's important to understand that it's a generational phenomenon. So the reason, what in terms of millennials, right? Millennials are really the people who first became digital. And so when you think of how they utilize social media platforms, it's very different than Gen Z. And what I find in my research through generations on social media is millennials are more likely to engage and share content that reaches a farther audience. They're more willing to be public about their content. Whereas Gen Z, believe it or not, the digital natives who were born into the digital age are really the ones who like to actually have private conversations. And that's why Instagram actually developed stories, is so that you can have more intimate conversations with 5 to 6 people, since you're able to specifically share content with your circles. And so it's important to note that there's a generational difference in how these generations communicate with each other. And then now this next generation after Gen Z is the Alpha generation. We are now going into the Greek letters, but the Alpha generation, by the time, but they're probably around 11 right now or younger. By the time the Alpha generation reaches the age of 3, they're already able to recognize more than 6 dozen logos. And so it's just showing you, right, that these generations are becoming very digital, and how can you communicate with them in a way that resonates with them?
That's great. I love the generational knowledge, and that's becoming more important. How do I get my Gen Alpha son to not want to engage on social media and phones and interactivity? Is that important?
I
You
feel
can
like
ask Tyler. I'm like, he has a
yeah. Take away the device. You still have the power, I hope. I mean, they're not 13 yet. I feel like after they're 13, then you're screwed.
Okay.
But until they're 13, you have the power of what devices they can and can't use. But
okay, I'll tell you.
But in an actual strategic way, teaching them how to be a responsible citizen online is also very, very important, because they have grown up with never not having a device, and being a good digital citizen is important. And that could be a whole nother workshop, but it is important to not just take away their devices, but train them how to use them responsibly and understand also how marketers and communicators are going to reach out to them, but also how other humans are going to try to connect with them. And some of that is positively motivated and some of that is negatively, and being able to discern between those two things and actually have still a good experience, because more of our communities are moving online, which is exciting, but also can be, there's always the equal, there's good and bad, and being able to navigate that in a good way is important for all of us, even adults, but also training our children to be able to have that competency.
Way to turn my joke around and give us actual usable knowledge. So thank you.
You're welcome.
This last question that I have is my own, and we'll give people a couple more minutes. We have about 5 minutes. But really, and I'm going to hold both of you to this, and I'm going to watch this again in 3 years. We get this question a lot. You want to be an early adopter with some of these social media platforms. Do you have any predictions on something that's up and coming now, or what's next after the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and people have gotten involved on certainly Pinterest and YouTube and Vimeo and Snapchat in varying degrees. I think that's another whole other question. Is how do it seems hard for brands to engage in Snapchat, but do you have any predictions on what's an important platform that you see up and coming that may or may not even exist yet that you think will be important to be an early adopter of?
I can chime in if you want me to, Tyler. This is actually fascinating. I teach a social media management course at Harvard, and I always talk to like senior managers, and they're always like, what's new? Like, what's upcoming, right? And I don't think this is going to be like rocket science to any of you, but obviously the advancement of technology in terms of artificial intelligence and virtual reality are really at the forefront right now. I mean, there's a reason why Facebook bought Oculus, and now they have an entire virtual reality application. And even though I would say it's adapting slower than I think originally anticipated, it's still moving the needle in terms of changing the way that we communicate with each other. When you think of artificial intelligence, the whole notion of AI becomes more sophisticated the more data that AI has, right? So the reason why Facebook and Google have been so successful is because of AI and its ability to anticipate the content that we want to see even before we know we want to see it. And so the more content, like Tyler was saying earlier, it's not free, right? Everything that we're doing is a data point. And so the more data that AI is collecting on these platforms, the more sophisticated it's going to be, and the more likely it's going to be anticipating the needs of your audiences. So the more you can start, I'm not saying you have to become an AI expert or go to an AI conference, but the more you can understand basic principles of artificial intelligence, the more you'll be prepared for the future of social media, because social media is no longer going to be a platform you go to. It's going to start becoming, and it already is in some ways, integrated into our daily lives, where the internet user and the social media users are one and the same, right? You're not, every time you go on the internet, you need to assume that people are going on social media, whereas before it was very separate. And now we're seeing that the using of social media is becoming one and the same in terms of it's a daily routine for people. And pretty soon we're going to start seeing technology being able to anticipate who we want to see, when we want to see them. And we're going to start seeing technology platforms that are more wearable. And I'm not saying like Black Mirror sort of stuff, but hey, we can wait 2 decades and see where that goes. I'm not saying we're going to have microchips, but wearable technology is really the future in terms of where we're going to see how we engage with those platforms.
Yeah, I think to build on that, the content side of that and the community side. So we are seeing, and you're seeing, a huge financial investment from Facebook in groups, community. People want to be with people, which doesn't mean brands and businesses can't be involved in facilitating that or be part of that. There is so much need for personalization. I mean, if you look at political advertising, which I find fascinating just from the micro targeting of messaging, what we are doing now in this space is no longer just billboards or just big, wide net messaging. To really resonate, we have to slice and dice our audience, our personas, and really know what they need, what motivates them, how can we add value to their lives. So similar to like what Anna asked, not that you have an easier process by any means, but by being able to focus on who you really want to be able to communicate to or build community with, especially in the digital space, you do have a leg up because you can focus. And that's where it gets difficult. I would say a good example of this locally is there's the Lincoln food group that's like, where do I eat now? Like there's a really popular Facebook group that's just talking about where to eat in Lincoln, from date night, pickup, and any kind of vertical of eating. People are in there just talking, and businesses and other groups are in there having that, but it's very community driven. It's very community focused, but it's also personalized. Like if you don't eat out, you're not probably part of that group. You don't need to be part of that group. If you're not a dancer, you don't need to be part of the dance group. But like, if you look on Facebook, the groups that are available or those digital communities, those are the places that I'm finding more people, employees, leaders, managers. That's where you got to start playing, because that's where you're going to be able to recruit talent. That's where you're going to be able to talk about your products, but in a way that is connecting to the life of others. So it is going to take a lot more personalization and energy, and a lot more training of people. The discipline of digital community and social media and AI, VR are not going to be specific roles. They're going to be part of our society. So we're all going to have to figure out where we fit into that and how we leverage it, especially when it comes to owning and managing a business.
That is a great answer. This is wonderful. I think that's all the questions we have for today. So again, I appreciate Jemalyn and Tyler coming on today. I know we had a lot of people sign up that had to postpone that, are excited to join us on November 6th. So will both of you be back on November 6th for this?
We will.
All
That's
right.
the plan.
So November 6th at 8:30 again. The focus will be digital marketing 101. I'd love to have all you that are here today join us for that one as well. And I'm sure it'll be just as informative. And again, appreciate you guys coming on today. This was really helpful. And I think this could be, a great benefit for a lot of our downtown businesses, moving forward. And, they're going to, competition's always been harder downtown, but, now with the pandemic and everything, any tool that they can have to help them be successful is important. And this is, you guys have provided wonderful tools for them. So again, appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having us. And we hope you have a great weekend. Go Big Red.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tyler. Bye.
Okay.